All right, well, welcome to yet another video of mine. I know there are not many. Of course, we don't do daily uploads. We probably don't even do weekly uploads, but this is, again, just my attempt to share my thoughts, opinions, views, etc. Not like anybody cares. Clearly, look at the views. So, anyway, I'm not even going to mention a name. It's in the description. If you want a little spoiler, we'll get to the spoiler here in a little bit once I actually do mention the name. But unlike many other conversations around this very topic that just sort of throw the name out there and then it elicits a lot of emotional reactions from people, what I want to do is ask a few leading questions, right? So let's think back. It's been many years we haven't been that great, and honestly, even that feels a little disingenuous because we finished, right? Let me take a second and collect myself. So we have finished very well in the league over the past, number of years, right? Second place finishes. Of course, obviously we're not winning the league. But last year was one of our worst finishes in the Premier League. Not the worst, but one of the worst. And eighth place. But up to that point, we're kind of floating around like second, fourth, fifth, like we weren't this bad. So, we're not winning a treble every season, of course. And so I think when people say that we've been very bad for a number of years, yeah, I mean, without lowering our standards and accepting much less, you could say that. But realistically, especially when you compare it to now, if you said, would you like a second place finish or a 15th place finish, you'd probably take second, right? So, but that being said, like with pretty much everything in the sport, you have to use your eyes and some critical thinking to really get a full understanding of a situation. So that's why when people talk about stats or, again, playing very poorly over a number of seasons, certain data will tell the truth. Certain data can tell a lie, not inherently on its own, but a lie that is supported by a particular narrative that somebody's looking to push. We'll get into that here in a little bit as well. I won't even go over hard numbers because those obviously fluctuate all the time. But we can make generalizations about certain data that people point to, and then it's up to you if you want to go dispute that. Look at certain data and see how that actually aligns with the eye test that I'm talking about. So those questions I was referring to, let's get into that, right? So the first question I have is, what would you say has been one of the biggest problem areas of United over the last recent years, right? Not even actually under Eric Ten Hag, but just in general, right? As we talk about sort of the struggle from post Sir Alex Ferguson days. You can maybe point to a certain manager and say, well, it was this area or this area. Generally speaking, if you had to choose one, which one would you choose? Would it be the attack, midfield, the defense? I'll kind of just lump the keeper into the defense so we don't go too far down rabbit hole there. All right, so you've got the attack, the midfield, and defense. What would you say has been the most problematic area over the last few years? I'll give you a second to think about that. I don't have to think about it. I've already prepared this. But are you ready? Because you probably will agree with this. If you haven't said it already, I would argue our midfield has been a problem area for many years now. If you have like the Pogba conversation in there, for everything that Pogba maybe should or sometimes did contribute going forward, he lacked defensively, right? Like he didn't want to defend at all. And you can swap out Pogba with any number of players. Di Maria, you could argue maybe Di Maria is more of an attacking player, but anyway, like kind of like a wing player kind of coming from the center. But yeah, I mean, there are a number of players that you could just pick and choose as to saying, yeah, probably the midfield has been rocky. Okay. So then let's dig a little bit deeper into that. What about the midfield haven't you been happy with? For me, it's that quite often we lack control over a game. I'm struggling to identify. Again, I don't have the best memory. A lot of people pluck out, you know, oh, this match back in 2003, I was on a bar stool down at the pub. When I say bar stool down at the pub, that doesn't make sense. I was on a stool down at the pub having my fifth Guinness, and it was the 63rd minute, and I remember, like, no, I don't have that type of memory. But I struggle to remember a match where we've truly just dominated the match from minute one too. I'll say that, right? Like when I think of a dominant match, it's just come out of the gates, dictate the entire match, score a few goals, probably take it a little easy, but still retain possession and just kind of really smother the opposition and not give them a way to get back into the game. When have we done that in many years, right? Even the quote unquote terrible sides that we should be beating, we're not. Sheffield United was a match that we struggled in. We got the points, or we progressed, I should say, but we weren't comfortable. It was very scrappy at times. I don't think the scoreline accurately represented that performance. And I think that's the other key takeaway too, is that performances and results haven't lined up, right? So possession, I think, is a big one. Retaining possession, controlling tempo of the game, just truly dominating. The other big concern I have with our midfield over the last number of years is that it's been very easy to play through us. Here we struggle to create from our midfield. And you could say that's probably, well, actually, it's kind of my next question here. But you could say that we fail to create going forward, but the teams have a very easy time playing 2-3 passes to get through us and break our lines. And now they're in on our defense and on goal. And, they either score or they don't, but it makes life very uncomfortable for us. So I think that has been a very problematic area. If you retain possession in the midfield, control and dictate the game, and you are less susceptible to those quick, easy breaks through us. And that's not even a counter, right? Like I'm just saying quick, easy breaks as in somebody steps into a pocket space, receives the ball, turns, and then has a few options going forward, and they're your 2 passes through us, right? So that's kind of question and my answer 1. Question 2, surrounding creativity from the midfield, if you will, but really just in the final third in general. And, of course, when you talk about the final third, usually that comprises the midfield providing the final third, and not so much the people in the final third, aka your strikers, creating. They can. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are many strikers out there who can create goals for whether another striker, if they're playing 2 up front, or, a midfielder crashing into the box, making a late run, etc. But I think creativity-wise, we've really struggled, again, over a number of years. And it's frustrating because there are some matches where we are fluid and we do create, and you see that we have the opportunity and the potential to play a certain style. But then we get slapped back into reality, and the next week is just a team that plays a low block. We don't know how to break it down, and we struggle, right? So creativity, I think, is another area where if I were to pose it as a question, do you think we've been creative enough? I think you have to kind of say no, right? It looks like a lot of times it's just not clicking. Third issue that I'll bring up is, okay, so we've identified that the midfield has been not the best. It's probably our weakest area. We kind of lack in creativity. So then generally you see teams try to make up for that lack of creativity in some other area of their game, right? It might be we're going to be really solid defensively. So even if we don't create a lot, when we do score the 1 or 2 goals, we haven't conceded anything, right? We will be a defensively solid team and score the odd goal, and that's how we'll get our points. It won't be a blowout, but we're just going to really shore up the back and rely on those 1 or 2 goals to ever come through. Or you get other teams that say, well, in open play, we're not as great, so let's rely on set pieces, right? Whether it be corners or free kicks, just a set piece in general. And we'll kind of make that our threat, right? Or even teams like Stoke where it's a throw-in, right? I'm just saying, basically, when I say set pieces, really just anything that's not open play, right? So whether it be from a corner, a free kick, or a throw-in, teams will rely on that to score their goals from. And they'll be really good at it, right? They'll be well drilled, and you can see that they've trained 1,000 times on this one set play, and you see a goal produced from it, right? So, okay, set pieces are usually another tool in the toolbox for being, the tie break, if you will. What am I thinking of here? Basically just supplementing for lack of goals in open play, for lack of a better word or phrase. So then I posed to you the question of, how would you rate our set pieces, non-open play, opportunities, right? Whether in terms of just creativity or clinical finishing, whatever it may be. Where would you sort of rate us there? Again, I think that's another area that we've been very poor. As of recording this, it's February 28th, 2025, and we just had a few games where, as I'm saying, creativity-wise, weren't that great. We really struggled in open play, but we did score goals from set pieces. And that's the way it kind of should be, right? I'm not going to let recency bias sway me and say that we've been amazing at set pieces. Oh, so good at set pieces. No, historically, over the years, we've been terrible. Would I like that to change? Of course. I like that we've been scoring from set pieces. I wish we didn't have to rely on them, almost exclusively. But yeah, that's what I expect. When you struggle a little bit, that's going to be what makes a difference in a match. And then I think sort of the last question is, looking around the dressing room currently, how many leaders do you see in there? I think there are a few. But even when I say that there are a few, I feel like I'm having to make an argument for why or how they're a leader. And one could make the argument that what they provide in a particular situation or moment appears to be them leading, but maybe not. Right? That's not maybe how you define a leader week in and week out. Where I'm going with that is like maybe Martinez has like a great tackle. Like he really just gets in there, crunches a tackle, and like kind of really rallies the troops, especially from the back, around this reinvigoration of, okay, let's refocus, let's tighten up, let's get our shit together and push forward. And so like that's kind of like a moment that sparks that leadership moment. Would you classify Martinez as a leader? I don't know. You could maybe argue it. But again, I'm trying to look for people that I don't have to argue the point. You just look at them and you say, they are a leader, right? When shit hits a fan, they step up, they organize people, and they lead. And I think one of the more recent examples would probably be Rafael Varane. He wasn't maybe a leader for the entire squad, but where he really led was that back line, right? Anytime he was in that center back pairing, if he was in there, he kept it nice and tight. He was very organized. He kept them very disciplined, kept them in shape, and he really led that back line. Without him, it was chaos, right? Because you lacked a leader back there to really, keep our shape, tell them when to press, when to drop off, and lead. I don't think there are many leaders. Certainly no captains, I would argue, in the dressing room currently. And I think that's another big issue. Whether it be our current situation where there are a lot of young players or our future situation of potentially only really recruiting young players. We don't have a veteran leader or a few leaders especially to really step up and be a voice in that dressing room. And I think not only that, but be a voice for Amarim. Almost like the fist or the hand of Amarim, right? Like there should be a leadership group in there that has his back. That when he puts out a set of instructions, if a leader or leadership group sees a player or set of players not abiding by the instructions or the rules that he set forth, right? There should be some sort of disciplinary action from that leadership group. They should step in, and it shouldn't all be up to Amarim to enforce, his way of play or his way of how you conduct yourself as an athlete. So there's a sort of like 4, maybe 5, but really 4 topics or questions, right? That where have we been weak? And those are some of those areas that I think we've been really weak. So now, and I've been saying this for years, so I will defend what I'm about to say and say this isn't reactionary. Again, this is February 28th. If you're paying attention around this period of time to anything that's going on in the media, there's one name that's been thrown out there by whether it be ex-players or the manager, whoever, fan channels, whoever, either in defense of or in criticism of this player. That player is, of course, no other than Bruno Fernandes. I actually don't like. When I say I don't like Bruno, it's not agenda driven. I will give it to him that certain matches he plays well. What I don't agree with is a lot of time the certain matches that people claim he plays well in. For example, against Ipswich. Let me move this. I probably will make a noise, so I apologize. I'm going to try to minimize that. Take that away from my mouth a little bit. So against Ipswich, people said Bruno's very disciplined. He's really sitting in there. He's not roaming around. He's not running around. He's very disciplined. He's very solid. Great performance. But under what circumstances? In that we were down to 10 men? In that we reverted to a back 5 low block? He looked disciplined and kept his shape because there was nowhere for him to go, right? Not that we necessarily then conceded a lot of possession to Ipswich. It wasn't like, oh, we went down 10 men and then all of a sudden, in the second half, they had 80% possession. We were at 20 and, we're the underdog. No. But it took us going down to 10 men for the team to drop off, for us to be more compact, for us to be a little bit more disciplined. And the point I'm trying to make is that wasn't a Bruno-led decision. It was a situational-led decision, right? Without going down to 10 men, we would have continued to see what we saw in the first half with Bruno just running around. I mean, how many times in that match alone did he drop back to be like a center back pairing, right? He dropped in to make it a back 4 when we had a back 3. And it was like, why are you doing this? Why are you there? Is it because you don't trust the back line to play out the ball from the back? But then it doesn't quite click that you are the outlet for the back 3, right? In the 4 midfield, you've got Dorgu furthest, he's the widest player in the back there. But so when he had the ball, he had basically 2 options: play it back to one of the center backs and or Onana, or play it into the midfield. But with Bruno dropping back so deep because he didn't trust the play out from back, I don't know. I don't know why he did it. But now you've removed your midfield option, right? So everything then is sideways or backwards. There's no forward option apart from Ugarte, who's on the right side, right? It's just very, very strange. We saw that the first half, but people just forget that and they just remember the second half performance and say, "Oh, he was super disciplined." Okay. Back to my point. On his day, when he plays well, I will say he plays well. I don't think he plays well regularly whatsoever. I think he had a fluke of a season in COVID, like many other people did, where we played games behind closed doors. There was really none of the pressure, whether it be at home or away, better or worse, right? I mean, right now our home form is terrible because there's a lot of pressure on the players to perform, and the fans aren't really accepting it, even though they're backing the manager and sort of trust in the process. There's a lot of pressure on the players, so home performance isn't the best. And then there was none of the away crowd to, really deafen us. So in COVID, Bruno looked decent. On top of that, he had a ton of penalties awarded. Not trying to remember if he actually was awarded the penalties or just in general, right? But he was our penalty taker during that season, well, always. And so it kind of goes hand in hand. We found it a little bit easier to create and possess the ball, and that created goals. And you had players like, you had attacking players around him that were also firing on all cylinders, more or less. And then the penalties on top of that. So then when you look at his goal and assist, contribution, it was very high. And people are like, "Oh, Bruno's the best thing since sliced bread." But then every other season has been regression since then, right? He hasn't created as much, hasn't scored as much, and I don't even need him to score. Like, that's the big thing. But then positionally he's been poor, and it's been very frustrating for me to watch him. So when I go back to my line of questioning, one of the areas where I think we've struggled for years now, the midfield. Two of the big points I made in that kind of argument is that possession-wise, we've really struggled. And we've been really easy to play through. Possession-wise, Bruno does us no favors. How often, again, even Ipswich, do we see Bruno drop deep to help the team, only to then boot it down the left wing into a, channel, again, exclusively a wide channel, and basically ask the winger to go run on to the end of it and then do fuck all with it. You see that time and time and time again, and it's a little bit better now that Rashford's not here, but when Rashford and Bruno are on the pitch together, Bruno exclusively looks for Rashford. And he will turn and punt it down the field, and that's just what Bruno does. But so now you've asked the winger to chase down the ball, and one of two things happens, right? Either it's a poorly placed pass that either goes out because, again, you're focusing on a wide area, so it's overhit and goes out, or it's intercepted and we lose possession just as cheaply as that, or a winger gets on the end of it and then they find themselves in a 1v1 at the very least, if not a 1v3, where now, right, the back line is at least covering him and none of the play has been able to catch up because everybody's 40-50 yards back because Bruno just punted it down the field. So then we end up kind of losing possession from that, right? Because historically we have not been good at then just retaining the possession and recycling it, which again, it kind of defeats the whole purpose. Like, why aren't you just playing through the midfield and allowing the team to progress together rather than boot it? You're asking one player to sprint to get on the end of the ball in the first place, but now you're asking 3-4 other players to sprint to catch up to play. And then we lose possession high up the pitch in not a dangerous area whatsoever, only to then sprint backwards when they counter. Because I'll lead into my second point here is that because Bruno doesn't involve the midfield, he doesn't retain the shape, he's abandoned his post, if you will, right? His position and he's left us completely exposed. All you do is you play the ball through the space where Bruno should be occupying but isn't, and now you've played through us in 2 passes, right? So everybody's sprinting forward to reinforce the pseudo attack that's never going to work. Now we're sprinting backwards because now they're through. And then you also wonder why people are injured all the time, why we've had injury crises for many seasons now. This season's been a little bit better, but generally speaking, season over season over season, we have an injury crisis because of this, right? Because we play a suicidal way of football. We ask, and this is also why Bruno is then still fit. I'm not saying that he's robotic and that he also doesn't get tired, but he is the one causing the chaos. He is able to sit there, right? Say we were playing a game of catch, or we were passing a ball, whatever. Any sport that involves a ball between 2 people. If I pass it, we're passing it back and forth, right? I'm stood still, you're stood still. And then I pass it, a very errant pass, and I make you run. You return it, accurate direct pass to me. Pass it again, errant, make you run. Keep doing that over the course of an hour. Who do you think is going to be more tired? Person that is the offender, or the person whose responsibility it is to collect the ball? Now, I just said you repeat that over an hour, but now you repeat that at least once weekly, if not twice weekly. And who's going to be more prone to injuries? Again, the person more static, or the person that's having to bust a lung to retain possession every time, or defend every time, right? So this is where we get into that whole possession and ease of playing through us argument, where it's very frustrating because Bruno has not been the sole perpetrator of this, but a massive perpetrator of this. So now we'll segue into the second argument of creativity in the final third. And this is the conversation that when I go back to a little bit earlier in the video, where I brought up stats and data. How stats and data are collected, but somebody can lie to you using those stats and data to paint a specific type of narrative that doesn't match the eye test whatsoever. So again, think about what I just said in terms of who Bruno almost looks exclusively for over the years. That's Rashford. Okay, so we take that one step further. What is Rashford known for over the last few years? You could either say scoring goals or not beating his man, but it's one of those two. In which case, though, both of those scenarios involve Rashford cutting inside, ignoring our striker, and shooting. Then you look at the opposite wing, whether it be Anthony for the past, couple seasons, even though not that much recently, but even Ahmad does it. But really just all of our winger profiles, even back to the Greenwood days, right? All of our wingers have wanted to cut inside and just shoot. They don't cut inside or beat their man and play in a cross for our striker to get on the end of. They're looking to cut inside and shoot. So again, when we think of our formations and where the ball's played through in the build-up, we go from the defense into the midfield, which is usually Bruno looking for that long ball. So you go through the midfield, through Bruno, to a wide area, to cutting inside, to shooting. Okay? I think you should be able to agree with me on that one. That's not a divisive comment there. That's just generally our build-up play. It's a broad generalization because I understand other people do contribute to the attack sometimes, but by and large, our largest flow of play is from the back into Bruno, into a wide area, into cutting inside, into shooting. Hence why we're always frustrated about creativity. That goes down as a chance created. If Bruno passes to Rashford, Rashford cuts inside, takes the lowest percentage shot ever, that's a chance created. Okay? You cannot compare him to other central attacking midfielders who sit just behind the strikers and are feeding the ball through the channels that are created through movement in the final third. Their chance creation isn't coming from I'm playing it out wide and that person's just taking a shot. Their chance creation's coming from creating for the striker or strikers, right? Again, depending on the formations. So I can play in the striker 10 times in a match. I mean, that's a little bit high, but just for argument's sake, right? I can play that striker in 10 times in the match, 10 chances created, assuming they just pull the trigger on every single one. And that person's going to be more likely to score because they're in the 6-yard box, maybe at least even 18-yard box, versus me playing the ball out to the left wing 5 times, playing the ball out to the right wing 5 times, and the winger cutting inside a few yards and shooting, expecting to go in on the far corner and far post. So who has the higher quality, right? And that's really the big thing, not quantity, quality, chance creation. I don't care about quantity. I care about quality. And that is something that Bruno doesn't bring. Okay. Bruno doesn't bring that quality in the final third in terms of creativity. Maybe he does it on set pieces, right? Surely. No. Again, recency bias. People will make the argument, oh, we've scored some set piece goals recently. Okay, whatever. That's completely recency bias. Go back further than that. Bruno is our exclusive free kick and corner taker. Corners really struggles to beat the first man, which is really sad and pathetic considering nobody's challenging you whatsoever. You just need I was going to say lofted into the box, but that's another part of his play that I hate. But okay, right. So he struggles to beat the first man. When he does get in the box, it's lofty. There's not usually a lot of power or pace behind it, which means that even though it's in the box, there's a lot of work to be done by whoever wants to get on the end of it, right? Such that they have to kind of time the run, jump, get on the head of it, get on the end of it with their head, and direct it on goal. Versus somebody who plays it in with more pace, and generally accuracy, but more pace, who even if you're scrapping in the moment, right, kind of wrestling a little bit and don't have the opportunity to time a run to get on the end of the ball, you're able to jump and use the momentum off the ball and redirect it on goal, right? You're not having to generate the power, you're just having to generate the direction, the deflection of that cross from the corner. Because the power is behind it. Bruno doesn't do that. Bruno lofts it, and either keeper collects it or somebody jumps for it, but it's like a half chance if we ever even get on the end of it. Usually we don't. Because then usually if he lofts it into the box, it's over hit. But anyway, just say we get on the end of it. Most times than not, it's again, people are tussling around. They're kind of moving, and it's easier for them to just kind of jump from where they are and try to get on the end of it versus actually timing the run, because we don't really look that drilled again on set pieces. And so they get no power behind it. Maybe they put it goalward, but it's a little bloop, type of a header towards the keeper, and it's dealt with comfortably. There's really no threat there. Free kicks, how many times do we see Bruno just smash it into the wall? Not even that, it smashes it into the wall. They pick it up and counter, right? They win the first ball from the deflection, and then they counter, and then everybody's streaking back, in a huff, and maybe we concede. that happens too often too. How many times do we see Bruno score from a free kick? It's very rare. Maybe it's a deflection, maybe it's, a keeper error in terms of position. Like, again, with the Pickford goal, like, okay, yeah, Bruno scored from a free kick, but there was no reason that Pickford should have abandoned the far post, right? He had his wall covering the near post. He saw the gap for where Bruno basically wanted to shoot or aim for, right, for the far post. And he just said, you know what? He's made contact. I'm going to leave this and then try to cover what the wall should be covering, and then it just went in, right? So I honestly really chalk that more up to keeper error because the free kick itself wasn't good. It went in, but it wasn't good. And if Pickford had just held firmly in his, position relative to the wall, he would have saved it comfortably. So anyway, but set pieces, Bruno is atrocious. So then we'll get into the next point of captaincy leadership. I get he's the captain, but to me, he's not captain material. People talk about his passion. I think that's fine. Let me put it this way. I expect all of the players to be passionate. That's, to me, a requirement. If you're not passionate, get the fuck out of here. But so his passion, though, doesn't show me that he's a leader or he's a captain. What shows me whether or not he's a leader or a captain is how he interacts with those around him on the pitch. Officials, he just whinges and cries nonstop. It's so frustrating. It's petulant. And honestly, like, every time he does it, it's just, I don't know. I don't want to call it immature, but I hate seeing it. It's like every little thing he thinks he's entitled to. And honestly, I'm a big proponent of a more open, fluid game where the ref doesn't just call everything, right? A little bit of contact is to be expected and let play continue. But a little bit of contact, Bruno goes down. Why didn't you give him a red card? Like, stepped on your laces. What do you want me to do? Like, not even like stepped on your foot on the laces. Like, just stepped on your loose shoelace. And you want me to send him off? Fuck you. Like, holy shit, Bruno, stop it. Like, he will stop to whinge at the ref when the play is continuing. Just continue with the play. Support the play. So him whinging, the referees, officials, whatever, linesmen, whoever, I hate that. But then from a leadership perspective, I don't see him leading. There are some times he'll like try to coach players on the pitch, which I question his IQ or ability to communicate the manager's wishes and instructions. I feel like sometimes he's probably just communicating things that Bruno wants to see that are counterintuitive to what the manager is actually asking the players to do. I have no proof of that. I'm not there for the conversations, but based on what Bruno does individually, I can't imagine that he's telling players around him to like actually execute the tactics well. Otherwise, you would keep your position and the shape of the team, and we wouldn't be so easy to break down, but I digress. Anyway, so leadership, though. Again, we have a lot of younger players, and I expect them to make mistakes. I don't expect any player to be perfect. The difference is that when Bruno makes a mistake, he kind of feels like he should be forgiven. When other players make mistakes, especially younger players, kind of berates them. And he's not the only one. Again, a lack of leadership overall, right? But his petulance and whinging has culminated throughout the dressing room. It's a little cancerous because you get other players like Garnacho and Højlund, and everybody else just starts, why didn't you pass it? And again, there's a time and place of like saying like I was a better option and calling out the other player. But when you make a slight mistake, but the effort was there or the thought was there, generally other teams you see like, hey, no, good job, right? Like it's okay, reset, go again. More of that, a little bit more quality, but I want more of that. Instead, we get kind of the opposite where it's negative reinforcement of like, no, fuck you, you fucked up. And then that person is resistant to trying again in the future. And so it really, again, stifles our attack. And when we're talking about the creativity, nobody wants to take the risk because they know what's waiting for them. Bruno and others throwing their arms around, getting frustrated, and not giving you the benefit of the doubt of like, at least I tried. At least I beat my man, went down the wing, put in a cross, and tried to give us some form of hope. What are you doing, right? I think Bruno sets a very bad example and a very bad precedent for young players coming into the squad. And so again, when I talk about captaincy, whether it be on Bruno or anybody else, I don't think anybody else would even do better, which is again the problem because I think we just lack leaders in the dressing room. So these are all of my issues with Bruno. This is why I personally have wanted Bruno gone for years. I think this whole contract extension over the summer, giving him more money, it was just ridiculous. Just let him go. I don't know what we're trying to protect, but I definitely feel like this next summer we should try to sell him because we've paid him way too much for him to leave for free. And I think as much positivity as there is around Bruno currently, we should just capitalize on that. And yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents, if you will, on all of that. I think there are many issues with Bruno that we need to address. And I think this narrative that Bruno isn't our biggest problem is a falsehood. Actually, let me talk about that just very briefly here. Falsehoods. Right now, the stat that people get thrown around is that Bruno has contributed to the last 6 goals that United have scored. I broke this down. He's contributed maybe generously to 3. And I have to definitely argue one of those. So 2 of the 6, 2 of the last 7 is Bruno's contribution. 3 kind of. Definitely not 6 though. So that's a falsehood that people are circulating Bruno's importance to the team. And if you go look back at our last 7 goals, 3 at best is his contribution to those goals. And then the other thing I really want to emphasize with Bruno, and this goes back to just the whole larger midfield issue, but especially Bruno, again, because of his inability to retain possession, because he's always going for the Hail Mary, the Hollywood pass, the booting it down the field. And he doesn't retain the shape or position that is required in the midfield to make us harder to break down. And again, his lack of possession, creativity, positional awareness, things of that nature, or positional discipline. Because of where he is in the midfield, the lack of possession, the lack of creativity hurts our attack. It makes our attack look weaker. I'm not saying our attack right now is world class, but our attack suffers because of the midfield. Conversely, players like Onana, so that argument is more centered around Højlund. People are like, "Oh, Højlund should go. We need an experienced striker." It doesn't matter who you put up there; they're going to struggle. They might score because Højlund's not scoring. They might score. They're not going to score you 20 goals a season in the side currently, and a large part of that's due to Bruno. It doesn't matter who you put up there; they're going to struggle. So why spend big? Again, conversely, going to the defense, I would say that Maguire and Onana are very weak, especially when we think of that spine, right? You've got Onana and Maguire and Bruno and Højlund, right? Like that's the spine. Onana and Maguire are very weak. But could we mitigate that if our midfield held its shape and if our midfield retained possession? Because the opposition cannot score when they don't have the ball. Right? So if you're retaining 70% possession, that's probably a little bit high, but 60 to 70% possession each match, maybe against the better sides, 50, right? But if we were better at retaining possession and controlled the tempo or dictated the tempo of the match and controlled possession, that would patch over some of the other areas where we're weak defensively, because all the play's happening in front of them and they're not involved in that play. So this is what I'm saying. Bruno is such a central figure to this team, not because of his quality, just because he's been made that central figure for many years, and we haven't had a solid rebuild to get him out, right? And we've always said, oh, Bruno's not our biggest problem. He's not our biggest problem. He's not our biggest problem. Well, you start cycling through managers, cycling through rebuilds, and he persists, and he's the persistent problem. Meanwhile, we've gotten rid of, other problems in other areas, but Bruno persists, and he outlives managers and other problems at the club. And I think it's time that we get rid of him. I think it's time that he goes, because he is a persistent problem. He will continue to be a persistent problem. And until we make him the biggest problem, we're going to continue to suffer in these areas. We're not going to have a leader, because he's going to assume that role. We're going to be terrible on set pieces. We're going to lack creativity. We're going to lack possession. We're going to lack positional discipline. And all of those trickle. I was going to say sprinkle and trickle, but for trinkle. It trickles throughout the rest of the squad, though, in the other areas of our play, whether it be our final third, their final third, midfield. It permeates throughout the squad, and we really do suffer. And again, yeah, we finished, in second with Bruno. Great. But I think there were also other players at the time that really made up for his deficiencies, or there were other mitigating circumstances that made him look better than he was. It's been about a 50-minute rant, so if you've made it to this point, I really appreciate you. I know a lot of people say like and subscribe like 10 minutes into the video without any substance, but I hope at least at this point in the video, regardless if you agree with me or disagree with me, I hope you do at least like the video. I'm not trying to call anybody delusional, or I'm not bringing name calling or saying that you're stupid for that take, etc. I'm just trying to provide an argument around Bruno that I think some people are beginning to have, but I don't think enough people are having, and are really examining him holistically. So thank you again. Until next time, this is the United Fan Channel, and I'll see you soon.